quick overview of what we have covered. So it will just take another 5 minutes. So if you remember in the last session, we had covered the basic idea of why we require SonarQube. So we had covered what is SAST. So SAST is nothing but static security testing that we do on the code level, and we had also described the both the differences between SAST and DAST. So DAST is a dynamic testing, and we had covered both the differences and where it fits in our DevOps cycle, right? Then we had discussed this particular module. This is ISO IC 9126 model, wherein we had discussed about different quality and external and internal quality parameters, right? So we had also discussed why we are using SonarQube and what it is. So where in the cycle it will be there. So this is what we had discussed in the last lecture as well. So today I'll be just starting off with the basic thing, that is the architecture that we require to know. So let me explain you the architecture. So again, let me just go back to the documentation. All right. So we have seen the overview, like how this particular SonarQube works. So basically, you do the, so this is particularly the developer guy who is committing some changes in the code. So the SCM tool can be anything like GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket for that matter. And then this particular code is pulled. So as soon as you commit into this particular cycle, it will be committed into
Shahil,
like
could you maximize your screen? I think you
yes,
might sharing that 70%.
it's okay now. Is it okay now?
Yeah, thanks. Yes, done.
All right. So what I was discussing is, so when developer commits this particular code commit, right? And now when he do this particular, so he might use any kind of source code management tool, right? GitLab, Bitbucket, GitHub, anything. And then once this code is committed, so it will automatically trigger a pipeline. So we are going to create one Jenkins pipeline, and we are going to create this particular automation thing, that as soon as this particular build is triggered, automatically it will create a build and it will run some scan test. Now this is how it works. So this is a typical cycle that we are going to follow, but let me explain you the particular architecture of this SonarQube. So it is so you can so this is a basic way of how SonarQube works. So let me just open the tool, so it will be better to explain you using that. So as we can see that particularly you have some SonarQube client. So this is your SonarQube client, or I would say it as a SonarQube scanner. So this particular scanner will be deployed on the node where your code is residing. Okay. So let's say in case of Jenkins, you have this particular slave nodes or the worker nodes where you run the jobs, right? So on that particular node, you should be installing this SonarQube scanner, or the other way around is, so you can use the plugins. So for plugins, I will be discussing later how to use those plugins, but for SonarQube scanner, it should be a mandatory thing. So what this particular scanner is doing here, so when you install it on some Jenkins slave, right? So what it does is, so Jenkins basically what it does, it clones the code onto this particular node. Now your code is residing here. So now this particular code has some source files, right? Just like we take an example of Java code, so it will have some source code, right? So what this job of the scanner is to take that particular source code, and why the HTTP and HTTPS request. So why HTTP and HTTPS request? You have to just send this particular code to the SonarQube server. Okay. So let's say there is one SonarQube server or the instance of SonarQube that you have deployed on your platform, right? So it can be a SonarQube instance. Now in this particular instance, what happens once you receive this particular code, right? So there are three components that are necessary when we talk about the SonarQube instance. So one component is a web UI. So that's what we are going to use most of the time. So this is particularly the web UI that you see when you install SonarQube, right? So in a moment, we'll be installing this particular instance, and we are going to see how it looks like. And then the second part is called as a computation engine. So this particular part is nothing but a computation engine. And why it is required is, so basically whenever this code comes, right? So as I was mentioning, right, we run some test on this particular code, right? We run our code against some predefined test, and that particular test are called as rules. Okay, so let's assume this simple example where you have some Java code, and now there are certain rules written for that particular Java code, like some standard rule, right? Like what should be the syntax, so it can cover a syntax, and again it can again cover what type of, the code should have this much specification, or the code should be written this way so that the less CPU utilization should be there, right? So it takes care of that. So there are some predefined rules, so we are going to see this everything in the dashboard. Now what happens, this compute engine performs the test against this particular code. So once the code is transferred using HTTP and HTTPS to this particular server, so this code will be run against your predefined rules, and then it will generate some kind of data. Now when you say it generates some kind of data, so you will have to store that report, right? So this particular report will be stored in a database. So that is again the next component, or it is a part of your particular architecture of your SonarQube. So this particular database will be stored in the database, right? So this data, all the computation reports and everything will be stored inside this particular database. Now to maintain this database, like you can run the queries, right? You can run MySQL queries and all that thing. But if you are aware of something called as Elasticsearch, right? So Elasticsearch is again an open source project. So it has actually its own documentation. If I want to show you that, this particular Elasticsearch is again an open source tool, and why it is used? So it is used for the indexing of the data. So when I say indexing, so what it actually does is, so it creates the indexes. So when I say indexes, what kind of indexes? So you can think of some kind of book, right? So book has multiple pages, and now on the front page you have the index, right? That particular index will tell you on which page this particular code lies, or on which page this particular information is residing. So similarly, this particular Elasticsearch is a component that is used as a part of your SonarQube, and this particular Elasticsearch will, fetch that particular data. It creates the indexes from this database, and when you query, or whenever you log into your SonarQube web UI, so it will fetch that data from this particular Elasticsearch instance. So what this Elasticsearch do is, so basically it divides your data into various shards, and then this data can be, seen in the web UI. So any questions in this particular architecture?
No, no, no. We are fine. We are already using, so we can go.
Okay.
Rizwan, do you have any doubts?
No, I'm okay for now.
All
Yeah,
right, all right.
if you don't understand anything, just ask. We're gonna ask
Sure.
explain something little
Yeah,
bit
yeah,
more.
yeah. Even if there are some small queries, also feel free to ask. Okay, any component, because when you when you face some issues, right? So you have to make sure that you can troubleshoot on the this particular component level also. All
Hmm.
right. So if it is clear, then let's move ahead. And so basically, what we are going to do is, so there is two ways we can do the installation basically. So first of all, let's go ahead. So we require some database. So as from the this particular architecture itself, we know that we require some sort of database here, right? So you need to create a database to install your particular SonarQube, right? This particular database will be used to do this particular thing. So to try this particular software, so let me just show you how you can
Hmm.
use this particular thing as a demo. First of all, so you can just go ahead and install the database or the Docker. So I'll just quickly go ahead in my AWS console, and I'll quickly create a machine here. So if you are well aware of the particularly this particular AWS, then it is fine. Or else I can again tell you like how to create the machines very quickly. So it will hardly take 5 minutes to understand how we create the machines. So do you guys already know it?
Rizwan is a AWS architect.
All right, all right. And what about you?
Yeah. Yes, I know.
He
That's
taught
fine.
he taught me AWS.
Okay. Yeah, that is a good news. Then I'll just
This
quickly
this
spun up
custom, this capture is just always you have to do. I think it is easier to do the voice capture.
okay.
Please type the numbers you hear. 1, 1, 2, 5,
7,
1, 1.
Maybe it's a email. Zip code.
Yeah,
Yes.
give me a
Windows
minute.
3.
Quickly log in into my server. It won't take much time. So I'll just quickly spawn up one instance here, and I'll just do one thing. I'll just quickly spawn up, and I will first of all introduce you to the dashboard
So,
that
Shahil, before going to AWS server,
yeah.
so we- uh, there is many kind of way to we can launch deploy the database and SonarCube and Jenkins and GitHub. So now we are launching directly in the server. Am I right?
Yeah, correct. So we are creating our own instance where everything will
Okay.
be stored. Okay. I'll
Okay,
just
that's
give.
fine. Yeah.
So what will happen is, so I just want to tell you from the scratch like how we create those things, and
Yes, yes,
you
yes.
know.
Go ahead. No problem. Would like to know. Yeah.
Okay. So first thing first, if we are going inside this particular instance, so let me just open the terminal window. Okay, so first thing what I am going to do is I am going to create a Docker instance. Okay, that is quite simple to do. That is just like a that will be useful to show you how the UI. So you already know the UI, but I think it will be helpful for Rizwan to understand how the UI looks like. So as I have talked a lot about the theoretical portion, so I just want to show him how this particular UI looks like. Okay, so that whatever we have discussed until
If
now.
you'd like, I already deployed in the this with Docker, so you can see my screen. I deployed.
Yeah, but I
Is
mean
only just
anyhow in the
yes, yes. Yeah, okay, yeah. Go on, go ahead. No problem. That would be
in the
great. Yeah.
future I have to deploy it anyway.
Yes,
So
yes,
and
yes,
again it's a part of the agenda as well. So like
yes.
okay, so let me increase the font and I will just say
Why are you getting little bit gap from the screen, like or we can see like this?
are you getting some gap here?
Yeah, gap left and right. I don't know why it's in your screen.
Okay, I'm not sure on that. But is the data is clear? I mean, are you able to see the
Yeah, data is
Ubuntu?
clear. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So let's quickly install the Docker. So installing Docker is quite simple. You can just say so. So again, both of you work on Docker as well.
I mostly
No, I
Docker
don't,
and
but
Puppet.
he mostly does work on Docker. So
Okay, so it might
I
be
wouldn't
useful
much.
in the future also. So I'll just explain you how to install Docker. So again, you have to just say Docker installation, and you can give any OS that you want. So here I'm going ahead with Ubuntu. You can use any OS, okay? And it will lead you to this particular official documentation page, which has all the information. See, now in this particular example, there is this option of going ahead with installation per distro. So you have CentOS, you have Debian, Fedora, RHEL, and all those OSs, right? So I'm just going ahead with Ubuntu because I have created a Ubuntu OS, right? So let's go ahead and let's install the Docker. So it is pretty straightforward. I'll just explain you the steps. So first thing you have to do is update the repository. So what this particular command do is sudo apt get update is nothing but it updates the repository current repo list. Okay. So what is the repo list again? So if you are from Windows background, so you might I don't know if you know this or not, but I'll just give you a small example how things happen in the Linux. So basically you have this particularly repository, and what is a repository? It will have all the packages stored. Okay, so it will be some kind of website, and here all the packages will be stored. Like let's say let's take an example of Docker. So this will be stored in docker.io in some repository, right? Now what happens is whenever you want to install, so let's say this is your machine, whenever you want to install any package, not just Docker, any package you want to install, so you first have to configure this repository so that your server understand, okay, when I say this particular Docker package I want to install, so it understand, okay, I have to go ahead and check this particular repository to download this particular package. Okay, so the same thing whatever I have mentioned, we are going to do using the command line. So first of all, apt-get update means what it does is, so basically it gets the cache of the current repository status. Okay, so it is just going, we are just going ahead and firing this particular command, and it will update the repository. Again, the process is straightforward. So first thing we are doing is we are getting some basic packages like curl, CA certificates, GNU PG. So this particular GNU PG is required to verify the keys, and then all those basic packages are the dependencies or the packages, those will be required when we install this particular software, right? So you have to just copy this particular thing, and that is, again, you are going to install some packages. So it's a very straightforward process, just paste that and it is going to install. Okay, so I think it is already installed, so nothing newly is installed, but in sometimes your server might not have those servers. If you deploy very minimal server, so it might not have this particular packages. The next thing is downloading the Docker official JPG key. So any software you will download or any software you will install, you require some key. And why this key is required? To make sure that the particular software you're downloading is an authentic software. Okay, it is not a third party website or some malicious software that you are downloading. So this key will verify that. So once you download this key will be stored in USR share keyrings, and once you install that particular package, so this particular key will be checked, and it will be validated, okay, this package is correct or not. So after that, let's just add a repository. So in this particular example, you see that there will be something called as docker uh, download.docker.com, right? So that means this particular website is where it will be downloading this particular Docker package, right? So let me just quickly copy this thing. So okay, so I have copied this thing. So this is like we are adding a repository as I mentioned in the step. So repository is now added, and now you have to just update the cache again. Once you update the cache, and then again it is the last step to install the packages. So we are installing Docker CE, that is community edition, Docker CE CLI, which is required to communicate with the Docker daemon, and container RD is a package that runs the Docker containers basically. So Docker is just a manager that runs the container, but in the backend it will be container RD that is doing everything. So let's just install this package, and once you install it is asking, do you want to continue? Yes, I want to continue, and that's it. So I mean, the Docker installation is quite straightforward. You have to just say restart this particular Docker service, and you have to just enable the service so that every time the server boots, your Docker will be running. Okay, so installing Docker is very straightforward. All right, so let me check the current status of Docker. So do you check the current status? So it is systemctl. So you can just say sudo, and you can just say systemctl status Docker. So it will give you the current status. So Docker is running, and again it is enabled. So successfully you have installed this particular Docker. Now the next step is quite straightforward. So this particular thing is just having installing this particular SonarQube as a Docker image. So this particular SonarQube software is having this particular Docker image that is available on the Docker Hub. So Docker Hub is a place where all the images are stored. Now this is an official image that we are using, so it is provided by the SonarQube. So you can see official image. So we are going to use this image itself. So in this particular example, once we use this particular image, so you need not to worry about the configurations or all those dependencies that you need to create. So this is just like a first example where we are just trying out this particular software. But yeah, I mean, so let me explain you this particular command. So what we are going to run here is, so Docker is a client that we want to run, and we are telling it to run some container. Okay, hyphen D means detach mode. So detach mode means in the background it will run. So if you don't specify this option, what will happen is it will consume your this particular shell. So you cannot then type anything else in this particular shell. So what we want is this should run in the background. So that is why we are specifying hyphen D. Then we are giving some name as a SonarQube, and then you are just giving this particular SonarQube ES bootstrap check disabled is true. So this is required when you make sure that you don't use any kind of database things, because we are just using a demo version. And then you have this particular port specifying. So what we are specifying here, so on this particular host, the 9000 port will be used to bind the 9000 port of your container. So basically your container will be exposing the application on the 9000 port, and this is your host port. So you are just mapping these particular things. And the last thing we are specifying here is the image name. So that's it. So any questions in this particular command?
Are we not any keeping any persistent value?
For now we are not taking, just this is just for a small demo,
Demo.
but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so see, there are two processes. Let me explain you. So this particular demo is just a tryout. Okay, so it will tell you the basic how it looks like and how it works. So basically, it works also. Okay, and when you actually want to install the server, so first thing you have to do is install a database. So we will install a database. We will create. We will install. Then we will configure some database parameter. So for that, you have to create the database user. After that you will create this particular, you will start the web server, so Sonar server. And then basically it requires Java 11, so that is a dependency you need to be installing. So definitely just give me a moment, I'll just quickly spawn this up and I'll tell you everything. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Go on. Okay.
All right. So this is just an example, okay? Because see, I have explained multiple concepts in as a theory, but I just want to explain you some more things in practical, like how the dashboard will look like and all those things. So this is like a one example, and if I do Docker PS, okay, let me do sudo Docker PS. So basically, this Docker PS is a command, just like you fire your ps-e, right, to check the processes, or when you want to run some commands to check if your container is running or not. So I think it is stuck. So I'm just taking the another terminal. Okay, so this is not working. So let me just,
It's showing the system restart required. So
no, I mean that is fine. I think it is the issue with the instance size. So let me just quickly change it to the
what is it? What size it is?
uh, it is,
T2
we are just
micro.
using
T2 micro, was it?
Oh, T2 micro. It's okay. Sonar
because see,
cubes
the
are a
basic
little bit.
requirement is SonarCube should at least require 2 GB of RAM. So you
Yes.
can
Yes.
just,
Yes.
right, so you can just go ahead here, SonarCube hardware requirement. So actually while talking with you, I just quickly spawn up that thing, and I forgot to add, see, you at least require 2 GB of RAM,
Prerequisites. Yes.
right? So just quickly I'll just change the instance type here. So
We can add RHL8. That's better.
just give me a moment. So yeah, I mean that is also fine. You can take any version. So it is not a, I mean, dependent on the OS basically. But the basic thing you require is the
Why
instance.
Yes.
Venkat,
Yes. Yes.
Venkat is saying RHEL because we probably be using that in future. So if we practice on that, it makes it easy for us.
Yeah.
So
It's just a,
as I gone through a lot of documentation also, there is some issue with this Ubuntu, the installations and all those things. Especially most of the people working on RHL family. So this Sonar Cube and the Jenkins, these kind of servers, once we launch in RHL, it gives more like either it's CentOS or it is RHL Direct, RHL, or like some other family. So even Amazon Linux also. So Amazon Linux is pre-installed, some other packages pre-installed. So because Amazon is providing like that, but when you go to the RHL family, it gives more packages, some installed.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to do that on the RHL also, you can also do that
Yeah,
in the
this is just for a trial, right? So when we deploy the servers, we can do the RHL 8, this
RHL.
updated version.
Yeah, yeah, that is not an issue. I mean, I do have a working steps, right? So that will work
Yes.
on that also. So I mean, that is not an issue. So let me just take the change the instance type. Okay. Okay, so whenever we will perform that particular, so until this particular instance start, let me explain you what will be the prerequisites when we compare, the production environment. So a small scale would be sufficient with the 2 GB, but uh, with add-on with that, you should have 1 GB free of RAM in the OS as well. So when we talk about the enterprise hardware requirements, so at least 8 cores and 16 GB of RAM is required. Okay, and so these are the hardware requirements, so that you should take care. If you fail to do it, definitely when you start installing, right, so it is going to fail because it do the pre-checks before installing it. So whenever we will install this particular thing, so we'll be installing it on T2 extra large. Okay, so we'll make sure that at least it should have the 8 GB RAM. So that's what we will be installing this particular individual or small team instance. And again, with the Java, it is very specific that it won't be working with the Java 8. So you have to make sure that whenever you install, it should be Java 11 only. So it will be not working with it. So whenever you deploy some instance, right, so you have to make sure that Java 11 is installed. Then with respect to database, you are free to use any kind of database. We'll be going ahead with the Postgres SQL, and these are the versions, those are available. And again, whenever you, so if you don't use any of the versions, so the installation might still work, but it does not guarantee, the official documentation still not guarantee that it might be supported. Okay, then the last thing and very
Yes,
important thing is,
Postgres also already released 4.2 version. Maybe the documentation is not updated. So when
okay,
we go for the updation, it will maybe might changes. Yes, the database doesn't matter, so we can go for no problem. Updated version or little bit one version later.
right, right. So after that, with respect to Linux, this is very important. So see, this is one of the main reason why installation fails. So basically, by default, this VM Max map client is set to 64,000. So even if I want to show this thing, I'll explain you this thing why it is required. Basically, it requires more number of threads to be opened because there will be lots of processing that will be done on this server. And if you fail to achieve this prerequisite, then definitely your installation will not work at any cost. Okay, so I'll just log in into this server. Now we might have a good amount of RAM, that's what I think. So let me just see, free hyphen m. So yeah, we have the 4 GB RAM now. So let me just check docker ps-a. So we have this particular. So this is the command that shows you all the containers docker ps-a that were running on this server. So you see this was exited about a moment ago. So I'll just remove this container and respawn it. So I'll just say docker. So removing the container is very simple. You have to just say sudo docker rm, and you can just give this particular id, and it will be removed. So now if you see docker ps, nothing is there, right? So let's go ahead and let's quickly fire the command that will be installing this particular server. So let me just take this particular example, and I will just quickly fire this thing here. Okay, and it is asking me that permission denied, so because the docker needs to be run with the super user here, or you can set it up. I mean, you can just add this particular user to the docker group as well. So that is a way you should do. I mean, you should not do it with the super user account, but instead of that, just use the add this user to the Docker group. Okay, so once you create that, so it will be showing you the current container that is running. So now, yeah, you have this particular 9000 port open, and this container is running successfully. So let's open the 9000 port very quickly. So you might say, like, why do I need to install this thing, right? So sometimes you might want to do some testing on your local system. So sometimes you want to.
Hello everyone, if you would like to access the remaining videos of this playlist of 50 plus more tools which are coming under DevOps, DevSecOps, SRE, DataOps, GitOps, etc. Kindly become our channel members by clicking on the joining button. You would have access to 100s of playlists and 1000s of videos lifetime access with this membership. Enjoy.
Thanks for watching. Want to study further? Join our training programs today.